Hi, welcome. Episode number 2 of a Bible Primer. My name is Doug. For episode 2, we want to talk about the Bible and the structure that's in the book itself. We're going to start with the word Bible, the name Bible. Why is it called the Bible? The word comes from a Latin word, biblia, which means book. Actually, that's not 100% right. The word biblios means book. The word biblia means books, plural. So you may have already, I'm presuming, opened up the Bible and seen that it's filled full of many books. That's true. It's a volume of books. So we're going to look at the divisions in there because they're not just random, they are in a particular order, and we're going to talk about that right now. The first division that you might see within there is that there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. It's not quite divided in half, but there's the two testaments. If you've heard that the Old Testament was written before Christ and the New Testament was written after Christ, that's right. The Old Testament was written before Christ, the New Testament was written after Christ. Now within each testament, Bibles are grouped into similar types of material. The first 5 books in the Bible we call the Pentateuch, 5 books. The Jewish tradition calls them the Torah. They're probably the oldest books in the Bible. Moses is credited for writing them, and they're also called the law because they give the law, the moral and the religious law that the Jewish religion is based on. The second group of books in the Bible are the historical books. We start with the book of Joshua, end with the book of Esther. There's 17 books all total in there, and they carry the chronology and the history of really the Jewish nation from the time of Moses until the time when when the Old Testament quit being written. So they're the historical books. Your next group of books are the literature books. I like to call them the wisdom books. Some people call them the poetic books. There's only 5: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. And they really are not speaking anything as far as history is concerned. And they are presenting pretty straightforward wisdom for us how to relate to one another and how to relate to our God. The last group of books is the prophetic books, written by prophets, and some of them have some history in them. Some of them have some very interesting history in them. But generally, they're prophetic books. They're written for the times that they were written in, and they are written for the future of those times. You will find verses and phrases in there that speak of the birth of Christ, the death of Christ, the ministry of Christ. You may find verses in there that refer to our times now, and I'm sure many other verses refer to a future time that my view is this: a prophetic book needs to be prophetically interpreted. And they can be divided up. They can actually be divided up into 2 groups. They can be divided up into the major prophets, which are the first 5 books: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And the last 12 are known as the minor prophets because they're much smaller, all prophetic. After that, you move into the New Testament. Now, there's about a 400-year gap in between the last book of the Old Testament and the first book of the New Testament. But the New Testament also can be broken up into groups. And the first group in the New Testament are the Gospels. Now, the Gospels speak of the life of Jesus. They start with the birth of him, they speak of his ministry, and they end up with the death of Christ, the death, burial, and the resurrection of Christ. 4 different, I'll say, views. It's like 4 different people looking at the same event. You get 4 different takes on the same event. Those are the 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The next one book is what you would consider the historical book of the New Testament. It's the book of Acts. And it speaks of the birth of the church and the first century church, how it grew. Revolves basically around Peter and around Paul. And Paul goes on a variety of ministry trips, and it recounts those trips. The next group of books in the New Testament are called the epistles. And the epistle is a nice Greek word. It means letters, like take a letter, Maria. Write a letter to your mom. So the next group are these epistles, or these letters, in which church leadership writes to usually churches and sometimes to individual people. The first group of this group is known as the Pauline epistles, meaning that Paul, the Apostle Paul, is the one who wrote this group of letters. And the second, and that would be from Romans through Philemon. And then the second group of letters, which would be from James through Jude, are known as the general epistles, that are letters that were written by James, Peter, John, and Jude. And the last book is really the only prophetic book of the Bible, and that's the book of Revelation. I'm sure you've all heard of. Also known as the Apocalypse, which means a revealing or an uncovering. And it's, again, I think, a rather prophetic book. So that basically is the structure of the books in the Bible. And I hope it's helpful to you. And we will see you next time when we talk about how the Bible came to us in English. Thank you.